Hey everyone, Sarah Barnes-Humphrey here at TPM24 at the Long Beach Convention Center for day one. And oh my goodness, I cannot wait to share with you some of the discussions I'm going to be having with ESG experts, Eric Johnson about TPM Tech, plus so much more. So stay tuned as we take you on a journey for day one at TPM24. Hey everyone, welcome to TPM TV. And with me right now is Chris. Chris, welcome. How are you?
Hi, yeah, great to be here, and it's sunny as well.
I know, I can't believe it. Sunny for TPM. Well, tell everybody who you are and what you do.
So I'm Chris Williamson. I'm with S&P Global Market Intelligence from the Economics Division.
Great. Now, what's one of your favorite things about being at TPM, and what are you talking to people the most about right now?
Oh, it's great timing for me to be here as an economist, because obviously one of the burning issues at the moment facing everyone is the Red Sea and the impact on shipping, because that has consequences for the economy through supply chains and prices. So it's an area that I've been studying a lot at the moment, but to have access to people who are actually involved in what's going on is really interesting for me here.
Great. Now, you have been speaking already this morning. You've been talking about the PMI. And you've been instrumental in really developing that for S&P. Talk to us about what exactly is the PMI, how are you using it for key economic indicators?
PMI, it's Purchasing Managers Index, is its full name. So this is an indicator that we developed. We've been doing this for 30 years now. It's based on business surveys, collecting information from companies on their business metrics like output, employment prices. And the key really behind it all is to get that information processed and out there to markets and business users faster than data like GDP, which is produced with a big delay.
Right.
So we need to know what's happening right now, not what was happening 3 months ago with the GDP numbers, for example. So more forward looking. So that's the whole idea. Give everyone a really comprehensive view of what the global economy and their economies and their sectors are doing right now.
Great. Well, and with everything moving as fast as it is, all the disruptions in supply chain, everybody needs that information just a little bit sooner and quicker, right? So talk to us about what the information provides around the US economy and for the global economies at large.
It's a very interesting time. So late last year, there were mounting recession risks in the US and in Europe as the impact of higher interest rates started to really be felt. They were all thinking 2024, you're going to get the main impact of that. But that's not come to bear so far. What we've had is accelerating growth and strong resilience, especially in the US economy. This is partly because markets are pricing in these lower interest rates, and that's already feeding through things like lower mortgage costs and so forth. So you've had a loosening of financial conditions that's stimulated growth already, even without the central banks doing anything. Mm-hmm. So we're benefiting from this. Recession risks have faded. We are getting this nice uptick, but the caution here is that that uptick is predicated on those interest rates being cut. And if the central banks are seeing the growth is perhaps going a bit too fast now, they might further rein back on those rate cuts. So we're at one of those telling moments, really, I think, in the next month or so as to just how much stimulus we'll see come through with those rate cuts in 2024.
And so what do you think about the word uncertainty? Because I feel like we've been using that word a lot over the last year.
You're going to hear it a lot more as well.
And I feel like people are still feeling uncertain, but you're saying that there's a lot to be optimistic about.
So we've revised up our growth forecast, especially for the US economy for 2024. It's around 2.4% now for 2024 compared to a prior forecast of 1.7%. That's based on this better start to the year than we were anticipating. But that doesn't mean that that's guaranteed, right? And the risks around that forecast are probably greater than we've seen for many, many years.
No one wants to hear that.
No one wants to hear it. So one of the other indicators that we compile here at S&P Global is an indicator of country risk. So we monitor 200 countries around the world, and every country has a risk score. How risky is it for the next year? And we can aggregate all this together to get a global risk index, a single figure number of just how risky is the world. Mm-hmm. And this made for pretty grim reading. In 25 years of data history that we've got, 2024 is looking the second riskiest on record, only second to last year.
Okay.
And these are quite high by historical standards, so it's quite a wide margin that we're risking. And there's all sorts of risk abounding. There's conflict, there's political risk,
right.
As well as the economic risk. So we've had the Red Sea crisis. That was where we started the year with the jitters. But it seems like our data on things like supplies delivery times from the PMI is suggesting that those fears are receding already.
Okay.
It was a short-lived disruption that's nothing like the pandemic. But instead, we've got all these other risks that the year faces, such as the elections and the conflicts and so forth. So heightened uncertainty, heightened risk. It's going to be a really tough year to get right.
So what do you say to that? I mean, if we look forward to the rest of the year and we think about risk, everybody's thinking about risk. They're talking about risk. Where do we spend our risk dollars, I like to say? What would you say are the trends? What are the things that people should really be, or supply chain professionals should really be thinking about or taking action on by the end of the year, given all the information and all the research that you've compiled?
So really, I think the lessons from all of this is that you need information, you need data, you need intelligence to be able to manage these risks properly. The risks are there, everyone's facing them, but it's the people who go into those risks who are prepared are going to be the people who come out of it better at the other end.
Okay.
And that's whether that's the economic data you're monitoring, whether it's the risk you're monitoring, whether that's the relationships you're building. All of it boils down to resilience. We've heard the word resilience a lot, and it's not going away. You've got the rising threat, long-term threats of more protectionism, the climate change. So any investment in resilience for the near-term factors we have, such as the Red Sea, is going to pay off long-term.
Okay.
So it's worth investing in. Get your resilience there and get those relationships made that can sustain this and diversify. Don't put all your risk in one basket.
So when you say resilience, what do you exactly mean by that? When you say people should really be focusing on that resilience, are there sort of top 3 things that they really should be looking at?
Yeah, well, the first one, as I alluded to at the end, and is that diversification.
Okay.
Supply chains. Whereas before the pandemic, we saw lots of firms were reliant on one supply chain, diversify it by region, by companies supplying as well. You don't want to be overly reliant on one firm or one country to be enabling your business to function. We learned that a lot. Resilience in terms of those supply chains and making sure there's a consistent, healthy flow of raw materials into your firm. Again, and just constantly monitor where those risks are, where they're developing, be early in identifying those so that you can take action swiftly. If you've got a diversified supply chain, for example, you can see how to move things in relation to those risks quickly.
Yeah.
That's the key to success really in navigating this.
So technology, quick action, and data are all 3 key components of that resiliency that you need to navigate in 2024. Chris, thank you so much for joining me here at TPM TV.
Thank you very much.
Hi everyone, welcome back to TPM TV. My name's Sarah Barnes-Humphrey, and with me right now is Lars. Lars, welcome. How are you today?
I'm very good, thank you very much, sir.
Great. So tell everybody who you are and what you do.
So my name is Lars Østergaard Nielsen. I run the Maersk operations for the Americas, so for North and South America.
Amazing. That's a big job.
That's a pretty cool job, yes. It's a pretty cool job.
I love it. Now, you have been to 4 TPMs.
That's right.
And this year is one of the biggest so far. So what do you think about TPM24? What are you talking to people about? What are you excited about for this particular conference?
So firstly, I think the energy and the excitement here is it's pretty obvious. So even though we're just getting started, it's still already been, for me at least, a couple of long days. A lot of concerns, of course, for my industry, what's happening in the shipping part of the industry, what's happening with some of the disruptions. So a lot of talk around that. But it's great to get to connect with both our suppliers, the many ports, and of course a lot of our clients that are here.
Yeah, everybody's getting together, lots of business happening, negotiations happening as well. All right, so how is Maersk outlook shaping up the Trans-Pacific and the Asia-European markets?
So it's looking more or less like what we had expected.
Okay.
When we came into 24, we had an expectation that the trade would grow by somewhere around 2.5% on the lower side and possibly up to near on 4.5%. And that seems to be holding where we are right now. We have seen a little bit of a dip after the Chinese New Year. But other than that, it looks to be as expected.
Okay, well, you mentioned disruptions. One of the biggest disruptions, and I think, I don't know about you, but everybody's sort of talking about, is the Red Sea, the Suez Canal. And I think Maersk came out and said that this would probably be a disruption into the later half of 2024. How is that holding up? What are we looking at? What should we be anticipating?
So I think firstly, making a prediction is difficult. So rather than making a specific prediction, I would say that unfortunately it's here for now, and we don't actually know when it might end. What it has done for us is that we have had to basically reroute our networks, and we have done that so that we can give our customers a greater level of certainty of what they should expect.
Yeah.
So rather than running an ad hoc approach, an ad hoc network, we have decided to essentially redesign our network and thereby giving our customers a greater level of certainty for what they should expect.
That is a big thing to do. I mean, you've got a lot of vessels out there.
Yeah.
You've got a lot of trade happening. How did you do that? How did you do it so quickly to be adaptive?
So I guess we had a little bit of luck, to be honest. We had learned from the pandemic that a lot of the clients that we serve were looking for greater reliabilities. They were looking for more certainty. So already before the Red Sea crisis, we had been building in a little bit of flexibility in our networks. We had been adding some ships. We had been buffering up some of the speeds. And essentially what we have had to do is to release some of that back into the system so that we sail a little bit faster.
Okay.
And we use a few more ships in the process.
Right. And talk to me about this Gemini agreement. What exactly is that agreement, and how is that going to help you deliver faster?
So Gemini is obviously for us really, really exciting and a major milestone in how we see the future of our industry. So it's a cooperation with Hapag-Lloyd.
Okay.
It's initially scheduled to run for 3 years with a 1 year notice period, so essentially 4 years.
Okay.
But we certainly envisage this would be a much longer period than just 4 years. But we start off there.
Right.
And what it is it's essentially a new way of thinking of how you design an ocean network. It's cutting out a lot of the variables that you traditionally see.
Okay.
So if you think of a normal ocean schedule from one part of the world to the other, ships would traditionally call at anywhere from 5 to 7 ports at one end, and then it would call at a similar number at the other part of the schedule. What we're trying to do with Gemini is cut out a number of the variables by increasing the number of transshipments, but thereby making it much more certain that cargo will be delivered the way that it was planned.
Okay, very interesting approach, and I'm excited to see how that works out. So now talk to me about the rest of 2024. What are you excited to see in supply chain for this year?
So I'm certainly excited to see that I think the industry and certainly us are building out some of the resilience. I think actually the Red Sea crisis is a good example.
Okay.
I think a lot of our customers are telling us today that actually they have felt relatively less impact than what I think they had feared.
Okay.
And I see that's coming very much as some of the learnings we as an industry have captured during the pandemic. When I didn't see how we combine the fact that we are now being more reliable on the ocean part with the fact that we are building out an infrastructure on the land side with warehousing, with trucking, first mile, middle mile, we really start seeing that the supply chain and what we call the integrated way of logistics is really starting to come to fruition. So that makes me really excited that something we have worked on for a very long time is starting to become real.
And we learned a lot from the pandemic, and we're putting it all into action.
Absolutely.
I love to hear that.
Absolutely.
Well, Lars, thank you so much for joining me here at TPM TV.
Thank you, my pleasure. Thank you.
Hey everyone, Sarah Barnes-Humphrey here for TPM TV, and I am with Jan. Jan, welcome. How are you?
I'm fine. I'm happy to be here.
I am happy to be here too. The sun is shining. We are in Long Beach, California. Why don't you tell everybody who you are and what you do?
Oh, my name is Jan Tiedemann. I'm a VP of Liner at Access Marine, which is a market intelligence company. And the main thing we do, which in liner circles among shippers and ocean carriers we're most famous for, is that we offer a platform called Alphaliner, which I dare say almost everybody in the industry uses to look at the ocean network, the fleet, the order book, and all kind of liner shipping related data. So that's what we're most known for, and we try to supply market intelligence and also news for our customers.
And so important right now with all the disruptions that are
Yes,
happening.
of course.
I'm sure that you are top of mind for a lot of supply chain professionals. Now, this is your second year at TPM.
Yes.
What is top of mind for everybody that you're talking to when it comes to some of the networking?
Right now, there's a very clear answer to that. It's the current disruptions, disruptions that the industry is facing.
Yep.
And there's a whole bunch of them. That is the situation in the Red Sea, so ships have to circumnavigate Africa, which takes a whole lot longer. Sadly, ships have been attacked, people have been hurt, which is, of course, a very bad thing for the industry, but also on a general level. But that's not the only disruption that the industry faces. We're also looking at insufficient water levels in the Panama Canal, so the number of transits have to be restricted. Especially early in the season, January, February, we're looking at storms on the Atlantic or even the Pacific. So all these disruptions add up and they make visibility in the supply chain very difficult, and they make it very difficult for stakeholders to plan.
Right.
So it's a difference. It's sometimes it's even easier to handle if you know that your ship is coming a week late than not knowing will it be on time, will it be 2 weeks late. Because what are you going to plan with? And these discussions, that mostly what people come to me and we talk about.
Yeah, uncertainty. How are you planning? What does that mean upstream, downstream? There's so many different things to think about. Now, you were just on stage this morning and you gave an amazing presentation. So
Thank you.
Let's talk about some of the insights you shared and some of the takeaways maybe the audience would have walked away from.
So in this presentation, I focused almost entirely on the container ship order book. That's what I was talking about. Because currently we have the largest order book in history.
Okay.
Just to give you an idea, we have about 28 million TEU of capacity in terms of ship capacity on the oceans right now. And a quarter of that, again, is ordered. That's almost exactly 7 million TEU, which are in the order book at the yards, and they'll be coming in the next 2 years.
Wow.
And that is the largest in history, and in absolute terms. But of course, that also raises concerns about, hey, will there be a tonnage overcapacity? Will the market tank again at some point in time?
Right.
And so I made a couple of points to say, yes, the order book is quite big, but here are some things that will put that in perspective for you.
Amazing, amazing. I love that. And I think a lot of people probably walked away with some things to think about when it comes to some of the capacity and what that's going to look like for not only right now, but into the future as well. As some of the steamship lines are sort of redesigning some of their routes, even as we speak at TPM 2024.
And of course, the big overarching topic is that shipping has to go through a green transition. That many of the ships which are being ordered right now are way more modern than even ships 10 years ago. They are designed to operate on new fuels, whether it be LNG or methanol, and that many of these new ships will be, at least in a couple of years, for replacement and not for overall industry growth. So we expect ships to come in, modern, cleaner ships, greener ships, but we expect quite a lot of older ships to also leave the fleet. And the only thing that's difficult right now is that this leaving of the fleet, this scrapping or dismantling, recycling of ships is not happening right now. Why is it not happening at all? Or almost nothing is happening right now. It's because of these uncertainties that we mentioned earlier. And ship owners don't know, or maybe tonnage will be in high demand this year. If things like the disruptions in the Red Sea or the Panama Canal, if all that persists for another year or another 2 years, we will need every ship that floats, just because we need to fill the gaps that open up in schedules. So they hang on to their tonnage. But as soon as there's more clarity and more visibility for the next few years, then I think some people will make a business case and say, oh, that ship is now at the end of its lifetime.
Yeah, absolutely. So with all of this activity going on, what do you think that supply chain professionals should be focusing on for 2024, maybe going into 2025, as they look to be more resilient in their supply chains, or really understand and plan their supply chains and their international freight?
As I've mentioned more than once now, disruptions. That's what this year is all about. And how to manage that? Well, it will be to accept to some degree longer transit times, and booking some of your cargo earlier to have a bit more wiggle room.
Okay.
And not run low on stock, so not have your warehouse empty if a ship is delayed by 1 or 2 weeks. And I also hear when I'm talking to people in the industry who are on that side of the industry, that they have learned their lessons in the past few years. When we had the disruptions during COVID, for example, we could see that sometimes it's a missing part, which is only worth $1 US, but it's maybe a spark plug, for example, but it paralyzes entire production plant for high value vehicles. So the cars cannot be delivered, so it can be a small part which is holding up multi-million dollars investments or whatever. So this should not happen again, so plan more carefully, accept longer lead times, longer transit times, and then hopefully you should be fine. And at the end of the day, it's also always, of course, a question of money. If you always go for the cheapest rate, if you push the carrier, then the carrier will have to make certain concessions on the new ships, the additional tonnage, the new fuel, which will be more expensive. You will have to pay $1 more in the future, or $1 or $2 for your maritime transport. And that's something that, of course, shippers don't like to hear, especially since we're just coming down from very much inflated, ultra high rates that we have experienced during COVID. And of course, quite often there's the attitude, I'm not for increased rates again. I don't want to see that again now. It'll have to come.
It will have to come, but that is really great advice to some of the supply chain professionals who are looking to be more resilient in 2024, look to planning better, right? I think that they can really take that and put that into action. So Jan, thank you so much for joining me here at TPM TV.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Hey everyone, Sarah Barnes-Humphrey here, back for TPM TV with Mary and April. How are you guys doing?
Doing good. We're great.
Yeah,
to be here.
Love to see you here. Now, why don't you tell everybody who you are and what you do, starting with Mary, and then we'll go to April.
I'm Mary McNally. I am VP of Global Distribution and Logistics with Fender Guitars.
Ooh, I saw a sparkly Fender guitar that Shakira used at the Grammy Awards museum the other day. It was fabulous.
Nice. I thought you were going to say her guitar that was during the Super Bowl.
I mean, I like that one too.
As well.
Not going to lie. That was pretty cool.
Stuff.
Love it. All right, April, tell us who you are and what you do.
April Zobel. I am the Profit Center Manager for the Andersons. We are a commodities trading firm. We move grain in containers to Southeast Asia, North Asia, and the Middle East.
Awesome. So now both of you have been to TPM a few times. Talk to me about what keeps bringing you back. Why are you here, Mary?
Relationships and engagements and peers, to be able to see not just relationships of your vendors, but relationships of everybody else who's in the industry. After you've been in it long enough, it doesn't matter where you've worked or where you've gone, you have lifelong industry friends that you get to connect with. So friendships first. And then always business and relationships. There's always some work that you have to get done and
just a little
fun. Yeah,
just a little, just a little. All right, April. What about for you?
I can't compete with that because that's like the only answer. Quite frankly, relationships, friendships. I mean, I've been doing this for 13 years. I think this is my 11th TPM, and it's like it's the humans that you see, the hugs you get to have, the memories made coming out here. I know that sounds like super cliche, but it truly is exciting to work with people that you really like.
Yeah, and it's great to see so many more women coming to TPM as well. You've been coming for 11 years.
Yes.
There has been
the ecosystem has changed. That
increase.
is for sure.
How exciting is that?
It's super exciting. I think when you look at the panels too, to see women represented on most of the stages this year, it's just, I'm super excited about it as a woman. Like, there's women out there listening. Your turn is next. Say yes. Like, we want to see you up there.
Yes.
I love that.
Yes.
I love that. All right. Now, the two of you were part of a panel talking about actual relationships, which you just mentioned is one of the reasons why you're here at TPM. So talk to us about some of the insights you shared. What did you share up on stage, Mary?
I think my biggest thing is I have recently changed companies. So I've gone to Fender from a larger company. So my biggest thing is going to a company that's shipping smaller containers and smaller volumes. How do you still be strategic? How do you look at your spend across not just ocean freight, but drayage, customs and brokerage, air freight, warehousing, and start thinking about your partnerships strategically? That's been a really important thing for my kind of few months at Fender and my time here at TPM.
Amazing. And then what about you, April? I mean, you're on the other side. You're a service provider.
Yep.
So talk to me about what the insights that you shared on that panel discussion as well.
I think a lot of the part that I shared and what I wanted to like double click on is leaning in and letting the carriers and your other vendor relationships learn about your business, not just expect them to provide a service without them understanding what you do. And we found that to be incredibly key. That relationship means nothing if they don't understand why ERDs matter, non-changing ERDs. It's all those different like parts of education that are so important to us. So it was really just leaning into the relationship, but showing them a part of your business.
Well, I think it's so important to learn their business.
And
how your businesses either do
Connect.
work together or
Yep.
don't work together
Yep.
and own that.
The word that I used a lot was partnership. I mean, who wants to be a partner and what does that partnership look like, and identify that together.
Yeah, and expectations around that.
Yes.
What is expected on both sides?
Yep.
Now, Mary, I want to ask you, because you work with a lot of vendors, you have worked with a lot of vendors.
Yeah.
What expectations do you have from a supplier, technology supplier, steamship line, of where they need to be, maybe from a technology standpoint, for you to say, yes, let's have a conversation?
Yeah, I mean, the number one before you even get to technology is going to be rate conversations.
Okay.
My biggest thing has always been, I want a rate that roads me all year long. I don't want a bottom barrel rate that then is, not going to cover me when times get tough.
Yeah.
And the economic outlook from TPM alone said, we have bumps ahead. So that's my number two, is from a technology standpoint, do you or can you integrate? How do you integrate?
Mm-hmm.
And then number three is there enough of a partnership here to ride through the tough times? Because that's when you really test a true partnership.
Yeah.
It's not when things are fine. It's when things get rough.
Yeah, and resiliency.
Yeah.
They have to be on both sides.
Yes.
So how are you preparing for that as a service provider and being a resilient partner for your clients?
Information, right? Information is key. How can I get ahead of slow times? How can I share what my forecast looks like? We're very cyclical, right? The egg demand ebbs and flows with harvest. And so what does that look like in the off season? How can we be a partner? What strategic opportunities do we have? Technology is great. We want the visibility. I think that's this like beautiful word today that everybody's chasing after. But for us, it's like, how can we share the right forecast with you to service our needs? But how can we be a better partner for you and where your equipment is, or where your space is, or where you need equipment in certain markets?
Yeah. And so what's one thing that you are focusing on for the rest of 2024 in relation to building sort of that resilient partnership?
We have found going to that vendor's home, right? Not just expecting them to come visit us, but show up in their business or show up at their customer service centers, bring my team so that they can get to know those other vendors, how they work. That's just been so important for us to let them, the partner, feel that we are in it as well and not just expecting them to come to us.
And cross-functionality, right?
Yes,
like we
absolutely.
have to understand all parts of each other's businesses to
Yes.
really be empathetic and understand how we can work together.
That's right.
What about you? What's one thing you are focusing on for 2024?
It's all about partnerships for me, making sure that I have the right partners who are able to support us globally and across all of our different warehousing, transportation spends, all of that, and then building the relationships locally. Just as much as it's important to go to your customers and see them face to face, honestly, people who sit behind a desk and have been transactionally managing things, if they haven't met the vendor in person, just like why we're here at TPM and we get together with friendships and people that we know, being able to go and actually spend time in person with all of our team members and our key strategic vendors is going to continue to be a foundation building goal for us.
Amazing. Well, April and Mary, thank you so much for joining me here at TPM TV. And we are back for TPM TV. My name is Sarah Barnes-Humphrey, and with me right now is Ingrid. Ingrid, welcome. How you doing?
Doing great.
Yeah, right? I mean, it's sunny in Long Beach, California, which isn't always the case. for
Yes.
TPM. It was not the case last year. But I'm excited to have you here. Now, why don't you tell everybody who you are and what you do?
My name is Ingrid Irigoyen. I'm the Chief Executive of the Zero Emission Maritime Buyers Alliance, and I'm also the Senior Director for Ocean and Climate Issues at the Aspen Institute.
Wow, that sounds like a big job. What do you do for both of those organizations?
Well, I am focused on helping this sector decarbonize as quickly as possible
Woo!
and
We need
in
that.
a way that will work for business, which
Okay.
that, of course, is the great challenge.
Yeah, and I think the biggest question is who's going to pay for that. But maybe we'll get into that in just a minute.
We'll talk about that tomorrow during my panel, actually.
All right. So talk to me about, this is your second TPM. And I know that it can be a little bit overwhelming sometimes, right? There's a lot of people here.
Yeah.
There's a lot of business that happens. There's a lot of topics that are being discussed. What are you excited the most about being at TPM24?
Well, I'm just so excited that with every year, it seems that the decarbonization topic is more and more important on the agenda. And I came 3 years ago, right after the pandemic. We were all still swabbing each other's noses. And
that was fun.
and we were in a breakout session talking about decarbonization. And I think that was one of the first times that it really was sort of front and center. Last year, I know there was a main stage panel. This year, not only do we have a couple of main stage panels, but also it seems like every conversation also comes back to this question of how can we be a responsible industry that does its part while also keeping trade moving and doing that in a way that's going to be economically viable. So I'm excited that this setting is an opportunity to keep that conversation going.
Well, and kind of that collaborative approach too, right? Now you mentioned that you have a panel tomorrow.
I do.
Can you give us a sneak peek into what you're going to be talking about, especially around who's going to pay?
Well, what we need to talk about is, and we'll be talking about tomorrow, is we're going to have some BCOs, we're going to have some shipping lines, we're going to have a freight forwarder. And we're going to talk about this question of what are some of the big challenges. We see a lot of progress in this sector, but the question of who pays, how do we pay, what are we paying for, how do we know we get what we're paying for, all of that is going to be on our agenda, not just tomorrow at the panel, but certainly for the next coming years.
Amazing. And so if you're not here this year, you're going to miss out.
Yeah.
And that sounds like an amazing discussion because you're really hitting all the points and all the key data points that is kind of top of mind for all supply chain professionals as they look at their ESG goals. So
that's right.
How would you classify the progress the industry has made to this point?
Well, I would say that the industry has gone from being perceived as hopeless just a few years ago to really making some giant leaps forward, which I think is tremendous. Not only do we see carriers and freight forwarders and BCOs making really meaningful commitments to decarbonize by ambitious years, but they're also taking specific steps. And on the ship owner side, we see a lot of dual fuel vessels coming online. Over 200 that should be hitting the water in the next couple of years. Of course, they're dual fuel. They can still use fossil fuels, but it's very important that the new steel on the water be capable of using these alternative fuels so that as the supply of those fuels becomes more abundant and the business case is made, they have the opportunity to be able to make those switch and not be locked into certain fuels or technologies that simply aren't going to work a decade, 2 decades from now.
And you hit the nail on the head because I feel like we don't have necessarily all the answers today.
Right.
And so the plans and the strategies need to be flexible. And I bring that up because sometimes ESG and decarbonization can get overwhelming and
absolutely.
be an overwhelming part of that conversation. But we are on a journey.
That's right.
We're not at a destination. We don't have all the answers today.
That's right.
So what's Zemba? Talk to us about what that is and what is that mission?
So we work with cargo owners. Zemba is the Zero Emission Maritime Buyers Alliance. We work with BCOs and 3PLs that want to be part of the decarbonization movement. These are companies that typically have ambitious climate commitments and they don't know how to reach them, certainly not in maritime.
Right.
And so what we do is give them an opportunity to come together as a group and actually run a forward procurement process collectively together. For zero emission fuels of the near future and hopefully soon the long-term destination kind of fuels and technologies. And the reason we do that is that BCOs have a lot of sustainability issues that they're dealing with. We can't expect each of them to have the deep expertise and understand all of the complexities of the different fuels. So we help them understand what are the options that are available, what do we see this pathway looking like in the future. But then most importantly, by running these collective procurement processes, we're actually able to help them gain economies of scale, which is really important for keeping the cost manageable.
And also time frame.
And then also having a bigger impact. You know, when you're being asked to pay a premium for a more sustainable alternative, most companies can't just leap to 100% of their freight, right? So how can we take those percentages of willingness to pay that we can find all over the world, aggregate those, and channel that money into the most economically viable, the most scalable, and the best deal for our member companies.
Right.
And so it's a way of trying to address both the sustainability goals and also ensure that this works for business. Yeah, and my last point will be that, a lot of the BCOs that we work with understand this concept of the cost of delayed action. If we work together today to kickstart this transition and build confidence in the value chains for the new fuels, then the transition will be more affordable, faster, and smoother. The last thing that BCOs want is more disruption.
Right. And I think what you're saying is that the responsibility for BCOs and shippers is really to get an understanding of what their options are, at least as a baseline.
That's right.
As a foundation. Let's figure out what the options are. We know that you've got a lot going on when it comes to ESG.
That's right.
So let's find a baseline and let's build from there in a reasonable way.
That's right.
Because there's costs, there's time frame, there's all sorts of considerations.
Exactly right. Yeah.
All right. So what's one thing that you think supply chain professionals, either on the BCO side or maybe the carrier side, should really be thinking about when it comes to decarbonization, ESG for the rest of 2024?
Oh,
to
gosh.
make the most impact, right? 'Cause impact is the name of the game.
It's so right, and I have got a long list for everybody, but I'm gonna give every part of that value chain one assignment. So for BCOs, send that demand signal. Your carriers need to hear from you that you care about this, that you're willing to pay some premium for some percentage of your freight to start. To carriers, I would say, don't put any new steel on the water that can't use zero emission fuels of the future. It's just going to delay and make this whole thing more complicated. And bring the best offerings you can. Make those e-fuel offtake agreements so that you can offer your customers a really viable pathway to a long-term solution. And for 3PLs, you're right in the middle there. So your enabling and demand aggregating function is tremendously important. We welcome all freight buyers to join our group. And we welcome all shipping lines to bid on our tenders. We'll be doing more of that in the years to come. And actually, we're at the end of our first tender right now.
Amazing!
Yeah.
Congratulations!
Yeah.
All right. Well, Ingrid, thank you so much for joining me here at TPM TV.
My pleasure.
And we're back for TPM TV, and I'm with Eric Johnson. You are running TPM Tech this year. Talk to us about the energy. What is TPM like? For day one, what are you excited about?
So it's been an amazing day one, day two, wherever we are right now. There's just a ton of energy here because we've obviously added a whole bunch of new wrinkles, a whole new area of the program. Physically, it's expanded into a whole new part of the convention center. So I think everybody, including the staff, is like kind of exploring new toys, basically.
Yeah.
So that's been really cool. For me, for TPM Tech, we've incorporated it into TPM this year. So that's been interesting and exciting because we have like the whole group of people who are registered for TPM who are on site, kind of like potentially reachable with technology discussions. Whereas before we used to do TPM Tech as a separate event.
Yep.
And it was kind of like, the people had to make a commitment to go there, but they were already kind of in that tech mold. Now we have the whole TPM audience that we can draw in and say, hey, let's have a conversation about tech.
Yeah.
Let's not just talk about rates and service and all the traditional things you come to
the disruptions.
TPM for. Yeah.
So many things are happening in
my
supply
God.
chain right now. And there are so many choices when it comes to technology. So run us through kind of the schedule around TPM Tech. What can people expect from TPM Tech this year?
Yeah, so I would say my laser focus from the outset, putting the program together for tech, was we're here at TPM. This is not a technology conference. This is like a real. Well, it's a group of people who are dealing with real operational issues every day.
Right.
So I really did not want to have sort of this like head in the clouds kind of approach. I outlawed the use of the words digital transformation. Like you need to talk about, you need to talk about real processes, real stuff, real things that people care about. And so that was my focus, is let's talk about the things that we know people in this industry deal with on a day-to-day basis and how technology is helping or not helping that.
Right.
Instead of talking about this very abstract notion of AI and digital transformation that really no one actually can define. Right.
Well, and actionable insights, right? Like
For sure.
actually being taking the information and the insights that are being shared on stage and making them and packaging them in a way that the audience can actually take action on once they leave here, or maybe even sending a message to their team and saying, let's look into this, let's make sure this process is where it needs to be so that maybe we can look at AI and automation.
So I have 2 rules when I sort of like build a session and recruit people for it. I have 2 rules for them. One.
Only 2?
2 main ones.
I feel like you're like Mark Harmon from NCIS that's got like 60 rules.
I got 60 rules. 2 that I don't have time for 60 rules. 2 rules. One is make sure that people in the audience leave with a clearer mind about the topic we're discussing than when they walked in. Because sometimes you go to a panel and you're like more confused than when you started.
That is true.
And second is like an event like this TPM. You may go to 15 sessions. You're going to have 3,000 conversations over 4 days. Your brain is going to be totally full. So I always challenge them, be the the 3 or 4 things that someone remembered that day. Right? So that they jot it down and talk to that team. So that's how I try to like really focus them on, doing something that's impactful. Because you're right. It's very easy to come here and hear a bunch of amazing things and say that's really good, and then you go back home and you just do the exact same thing, and you're not clearer. So
let's not
have a call
do
to
that.
action. Have a call to action.
So let's talk about that call to action. What do you hope the audience walks away from TPM Tech with? From TPM24 moving into the rest of the year?
Well, I always hope...
Hard question.
Yeah, it is, but it's a good one. I mean, I always hope that people are... people in general, no matter if it's a shipper, forwarder, a port, carrier, anybody, they always have far too many options to consider than they have the ability to sort of like navigate, right? So I hope that they walk away from any programming that we do with a clearer framework for how to make that decision.
Okay.
I'm not going to make the decision for them. That's up to them. That's their job.
Yep.
But if they have a clearer view on on how to make the decision, then I feel like we've succeeded. So if it's, let's say it's something about, like we had a session about, are shippers going to start to make ocean bookings themselves instead of relying on forwarders, which they've normally done, right? It may be that at the end of the discussion, they've decided, no, I like the way it's set up right now. It doesn't make sense for me to take that burden on, even if the tech is there to help it, make it happen. Or they could say, this makes a lot of sense. Now I have work to do. I have homework I need to do. Let me figure out how to actually take this process on myself. So.
Well, and I know in my session tomorrow, one of the important questions that I think needs to be answered is, what do BCOs, shippers, expect from 3PLs, freight forwarders, steamship lines, from a technology perspective? Where do they expect them to be? And then I think that is an actionable insight that the industry can take away and be like, oh, this is where our customers are expecting us to be. This is where we're here today. Okay, we need to be looking into these 3, maybe 2, 4 things.
You have a very important discussion to be had with Julia at $1 Million Baby.
And she's going to be on TPM TV tomorrow.
Yeah,
so we might share it.
I'm sorry we have so many sessions going on. I'm not even going to see it because I'm going to be on stage in another part, but I'll catch it after. I think what you just talked about is probably the most important thing out there from a technology perspective is, to what extent do shippers take on the innovation burden themselves, or to what extent do they outsource that innovation burden to 3PLs? Because you always hear about outsourcing in terms of like, well, I'm outsourcing to people or I'm outsourcing to a company, but there's actually this now phenomenon of like, I as a shipper, I don't have the bandwidth to like innovate the way I need to. So I'm going to shift that out. I'm going to outsource it essentially to my 3PL. So they're not just going to move freight for me. They're not just going to tell me where the freight is. They have to actually think ahead of where I need to be. Right? So that's a very fascinating conversation.
Yeah, and I think the other question too is, who owns the data? Where's the data being stored? Who owns the data?
Depends on who you ask.
And when you're outsourcing or you're trying to do it yourself, but most people are outsourcing that technology. And those are some very important questions that we, and I hope you, are going to be asking for TPM Tech. Well, Eric, I am, I love the program that you've put together. I think if you're not here for TPM Tech this year, you definitely need to be here for 2025.
Yeah, make your plans right now.
Because
book a hotel right now.
Book a hotel right now. Because you are just going to up the game when it comes to what you're putting out there for TPM Tech. So thanks so much for joining me for TPM
Thanks
TV.
for having me. Yeah.
And let's see what's more on the agenda for tomorrow.
Cool.
Hey everyone, Sarah Barnes-Humphrey here at TPM24 in Long Beach, California, and it is the end of day one. As you can see, everybody has gone out on the town for the evening, but I hope you've enjoyed some of the sessions that we have shared with you on TPM TV today, just giving you a bit of a glimpse and insight into what you may have missed by not being here at TPM24. And we have way more lined up for you for day two on TPM TV, so I will see you tomorrow.